You ready?
Ready.
All right. Tell us your name, where you're from, and how old you are.
I'm James Angelo. I live in West Point, Mississippi right now, and I'm 59 years old.
What's the point of this interview? Why did you say yes?
Well, a book I read has some statements in it about our primary purpose is to carry this message to those that are sick and suffering, and that's why I say yes to these interviews.
Do you have a sobriety date?
I do. My sobriety date is October 21st of 2016.
That's awesome. So how many years of sobriety is that for you?
It's almost 4.
Almost 4, okay.
4 in October, so 3.5.
Tell us about how you grew up.
Well, I grew up some in Memphis, but I grew up mostly in Hernando, Mississippi. Out in the country, good old country boy. Rode buses to school, smoked dope on the school bus, so just country boy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, as an addict, what drugs have you used?
I have used pretty much every type. I mean, I haven't used a lot of the newer drugs, the things that we had like ecstasy and stuff like that. I never got into that kind of things, but we had what was pretty much the same thing called Quaaludes, any kind of narcotics. I love narcotics, Dilaudid, Demerols. Lortabs, they're okay. You got to take so many of them, but those type of things. I've done my share of meth, cocaine. I love crack cocaine, but it was mostly the narcotics that I loved.
Have you lived in Mississippi your whole life?
No, I was born in Texas, and then we moved out of Houston, Texas to Memphis till I was about 12, 13 years old, and then we moved to Hernando, Mississippi.
Okay. And you
in 1973. So.
Kind of back and forth through different cities? Or?
Well, from 1973, it was pretty much Hernando, Mississippi.
Okay.
So
okay, gotcha.
I lived in Missouri for about 6 years, in 1995 to about 89, maybe from 94 till about 89. So
okay.
98, excuse me.
That's all right.
94 till 98.
Okay.
So 4
right.
years.
Sweet.
I did a lot of drugs. You gotta.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so can you describe your history of drug use, kind of how it started and how it progressed?
Well, it started pretty basic. I've always been around alcohol. My dad that was his thing, was drinking beer, and so that really didn't play much into anything. We used to go out on Friday and Saturday nights and drink beer. We'd go to an old rented out, tore out chicken house in Coldwater called the Skating Rink. And down there we would drink, on Friday and Saturday nights and skate and, do what teenagers do. And one weekend, me and some buddies of mine decided we wanted to smoke us a joint. We was going to smoke a joint, and we did that, and I absolutely loved it. I quit smoking cigarettes that night. I started spending my lunch money and stuff like that to buy marijuana with, and that was pretty much every weekend thing. Then it progressed to every day. But when I was 15 years old, I took my first shot of dope, which was back then it's called Teas and Blues. It was a mixture of Talwins, which is a narcotic, and an antihistamine. You mixed them together, and man, it made me sick as a dog. But I loved that feeling. I was calm and relaxed. So that's where I progressed into my narcotics use.
Okay.
Drugs like that.
Did you have a drug of choice? Something that you used the most?
Back then it was Demerol.
Demerol?
I loved Demerol. The feeling I got when I shot one of those was like people get smoking menthol cigarettes is what I compared
Oh, really?
it to. It just would take my breath away, and then I would be calm. I'm always so scatterbrained anyway, and I like things that calm me down. But
so was that the escape, just the calm, or was there more to it?
Well, I like that feeling. I wasn't trying to escape any kind of emotional trauma or nothing like that. I mean, I've had a rough life pretty much all my life, and my dad had conditioned me for stuff like that. You're a boy, you're a man, we're tough, so things in life that happened that they really didn't traumatize me that much. And you know, like we had drugs called Prelude back then, which was a speed, Desoxyn, and those were okay. I like it. I mean, I did drugs. If you put it in front of me, I didn't care what it was. I did it, but my choice was narcotics and opioids and stuff like that. So.
All right. So what do you think in your addiction you lost?
I definitely lost my sanity. That was the first thing that I would say that I lost. I lost some other things, but I didn't really notice that. You know, people started distancing themselves from me and things like that. But I started to where all I thought about was getting high, and I didn't care what the consequences were or anything like that. I didn't care if I went to work. I didn't care if my wife didn't like, you know, my family didn't like what I was doing. That's all that occupied my mind. And through that, you know, I wound up over time losing everything, you know, family, friends, jobs, almost my life. You
Couple
know,
times or not at all? Did you ever have an overdose or anything like that?
I overdosed. I tried to overdose on purpose several times. Now, I never accidentally OD'd because I like to, you know, I like to get the full effects.
Sure.
When I did drugs, I didn't want to, you know, I mean, crack cocaine was the only thing that actually made me want more of it as soon as I got a hit.
Sure.
Dilaudid and Demerol and stuff like that, I would usually wait until I was able to get up and walk around and function and go, I need to do another shot.
Yeah.
But the cocaine definitely it got it hooked in me, and that's what I went to prison for, was crack cocaine. I broke into a person's house in Missouri and stole some of their stuff, and I got caught, and that cost me almost a year of my life.
Was that the only time you'd spent in jail?
That's the only time I spent in prison. Now, I've been in and out of the county jail since 17 years old. I mean, they got where they already knew me, you know. They put him back there. Yep.
Okay. Well, in your addiction, can you tell me a story of trauma?
The worst trauma that I had in my addiction was I was living in Missouri, and me and my wife had a big falling out, and so I decided I was going to come back to Mississippi, and I came back to Hernando, and I hooked up with a buddy of mine. We went to Memphis and got us some K4s, and I had done those and was what we call nodding. I wasn't passed out. I was just laid out enjoying my high. And my stepdaughter's boyfriend had came by. He hadn't seen me in a while. And he wanted to go party. He wanted to go. He's 19 years old.
Yeah.
He wanted to go to a party outside of Memphis. And I finally, you know, to get him off my nerves, I went with him and his little brother. And we got up there, and there wasn't no party. And on the way back, this was about 11 o'clock at night, on the way back to my friend's house, he ran a stop sign and got T-boned. And when I woke up, I was being airlifted to the med in Memphis, and they told me both of those boys got killed in that car wreck.
Oh, gosh.
And, you know, when I woke up, I was laid out in the street, and they stripped me completely naked, and I kept asking them about them boys, and then they wouldn't say. So when they finally told me, you know, I was beating myself up about it, was because here I was burnt out. I wanted my life to end. I had tried to kill myself several times, and here I was still alive, and these two teenage boys are dead. You know, so that still to this day I have consequences from that. It destroyed my left shoulder and stuff, and if I do anything with my left arm, it reminds me of that to this day.
How did your family handle the addiction?
They pretty much left. Everybody, I've been married 4 times. All 4 of my wives, you know, had enough, because through my addiction I did things that I shouldn't have been doing, like affairs and some abuse to one of my wives, pretty bad. My children just, they couldn't handle it because of my attitude. I had gotten so I wasn't necessarily violent physically towards them, but verbally, verbally abusive and tearing things up, and I drove them all away from me, so my family just withdrew completely, and my dad, he wouldn't even have anything to do with me. I couldn't come to his house. He wouldn't answer my phone calls or none of that, so I pretty much wound up hitting rock bottom.
Was that the point, your rock bottom? Was that when drugs had just taken over your life?
They had, and I had tried through several different avenues to quit. When I mentioned going to prison in Missouri, that's where I attended my first AA meeting, and I liked it. So, but I didn't stick with the program. When I got back to Mississippi, I stayed clean and sober for about a year, and then I would relapse for good reasons, But when I finally went back out there for good, that's when I thought the only way out was suicide.
So now give me the point, like when and why did you stop?
I was tired of it. I could see I was hurting people that I loved. It had cost me jobs, houses, homes. I had tried moving to, change of location, and that didn't. There's drugs up everywhere, it doesn't matter where I went. So, and I had just, like I said, I had tried other programs and been in and out of rehabs. The rehab facility up there in DeSoto County was just like the jailhouse. They knew it, when I was coming. Hey, well, we're glad you're back, but and it just nothing seemed to work. I didn't know what it was I was looking for.
Sure.
So I came to that point that I felt like the only way out was suicide.
So now you've stopped. You're moving forward. What was the process of healing like?
The process of healing has been, I like the word journey, because on a journey, you go through some pretty smooth travels, some nice, cool roads where the flowers are nice and pretty and they smell good, and then you come into some terrain that's not really that comfortable. You might fall and hurt yourself, and all these things happen to you. So it's been a journey of discovery. I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned a lot about how my actions affected other people. So it's definitely been a journey for me.
Has relapse been a part of some of that along the way?
It was, like I said before, in the early 90s up till about 2005, I had relapsed several times, and when I went back for that last relapse, I stayed in it for pretty close to 10 years.
What was the difference this time? Why have you had such a long stint of sobriety, you think?
Well, I got back to that point where I was tired of hurting others and tired of hurting myself. It wasn't doing any good trying to kill myself. So instead of hurting myself, I decided I would lash out and hurt the person that I considered was hurting me the most, and that was my dad. So I reached out and I took everything away from him that he had. I burned his house down, his barn down. And that was when I decided, when I was in prison for that, when I started looking at my actions and really thinking about, the consequences of these drugs and alcohol, I decided, I knew what had kind of worked before. So I wanted that again. And I didn't know where to get it. I didn't know where it was going to come from, but I knew pretty much what I needed to do. And that was to change the people, places, and things that I went to and hang out. So I set that plan in motion while I was in prison, setting up those things, and what I thought I was going to do. But God had another plan for me.
What are you doing now? What's the daily life like for you now?
Daily life for me is I get up, I do my prayers and meditations. I go to work. I got a real great employer right now, who supports me 100% in my recovery, and he knows pretty much all about my past. I love working with others. Things like this right here. This is how we carry the message to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what some of that other literature I was stating earlier says. If we intend to keep what we have, we must insist on giving it away.
So
that's,
other than like meetings like this where you do interviews, what are some of the other things you do to carry your message?
well, I do go to meetings. I do have people that I reach out to. I'm very active in Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christ-centered recovery program. It's a 12-step program, and it not only helps with addictions and alcoholism, but any other issues you might struggle with in life, like anxiety, depression, pornography, overeating, just any of the hurts, hang-ups, and habits that we struggle with in daily life. I love that, and I volunteer at a place in West Point called The Mission. And
This
what
is
they're
West
trying
Point,
to...
West Point, Mississippi.
West Point, Mississippi,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. What they're trying to do there is help guys who are like me, who got out of prison and have had enough.
Sure.
They've been in and out of prison, they've been in and out of recovery programs, and it just hasn't seemed to work.
Mm-hmm.
So society in general frowns upon convicted felons.
Mm-hmm.
Job applications, are you a convicted felon?
Right.
So, and they give up. And I did the same thing. So what I try to do by volunteering at the Mission is say, look, you can do it. It's not easy. It's a struggle, but living one day at a time and staying busy, like
Mm-hmm.
things like this, and working with others and carrying the message and things like that. I give it all away. I give it away.
That's awesome. So let's take a step back. What do you think would happen if you used one more time?
Everybody always says they don't think they have one more relapse in them, and I couldn't say for sure that I don't, but I believe with all honesty that I would die, because I don't see me going back to prison. If it came down to me shooting dope again, I would go on and just take myself out, and that way it would be over with.
Don't intend on suffering
Or putting it on
cage.
anybody else.
Sure.
I don't want to put the pain and anguish on anybody. Not you, not this town, not the family that I have now. My family, my blood family to this day still does not want anything to do with me because of my addictions and stuff. So before I would go through that road again, I would just go on and end it all.
What do you think is your biggest support right now, on those days of struggle?
My biggest support system are my sponsors, my accountability partners, Celebrate Recovery, and my higher power, which is Jesus Christ.
How did you find a sponsor?
Well, I came here to Columbus when I got released from Parchman in 2016 to a place called the Last House on the Block.
Mm-hmm.
There they have a rule that you find a sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
You get in a group, you get a sponsor, and you work the steps. So I gave them some names of some potential sponsors, and the one that I really liked the most, they approved. So
Which is actually my sponsor.
yes,
Right?
same sponsor.
That's awesome.
We're both looking for another sponsor right
Sure.
now. So,
Yeah. All right.
but he's been my sponsor through it all. He worked the steps with me. He's the first. That's where the difference was. He came there and we started working those steps. That's where my life started changing. Before, I had never worked those steps.
Mm-hmm.
And he came and we opened up and we started reading, and 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through the steps, and he still to this day holds me accountable on my amends and stuff like that. So,
Well, I know you're passionate about helping others in recovery. What would be your number one, piece of advice to somebody that is currently suffering?
if you're currently suffering from any type of addiction or alcoholism, first and foremost, reach out, call somebody, somebody that you see in these videos or any way, reach out to this recovery community Don't be scared. Don't be ashamed. We've all been there. And then keep coming back. Don't ever stop. Get a sponsor. That's the biggest step. And then start working the steps with them. If they don't work those steps, that's not who God has for you. Find somebody that is doing this thing and then ask them to be your sponsor and start working those steps. And you too will have that transformation. You know, your thought process will change. Your heart process will change. Your life will change. Your perception on life will change. That's the biggest key for me.
Love it. Do you have anything else that you just think is bubbling up on your mind?
You know, that I just hope that like I said, that if anybody is struggling right now, please just reach out. You know, times are tough right now, and there's, you know, it's so easy to go out and get some drugs and alcohol instead of going and getting help.
Right.
So if you got a problem with it, man, please, that's the biggest thing. That's why I'm here. Please reach out. You know, y'all are more than welcome to put my information on here. I would love to hear from somebody that needs help. That's what we do at the mission. If we can't help you, we can hook you up with somebody else that will. So that's why. That's what keeps me going.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I think we're good. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for having me.